Okay, hello. My name is Taylor Nagel. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the events coordinator for the Career Success Team at UC Santa Cruz. I hope you're super excited for today's program, Grow Before You Grow, Gap Year Programs. We have 4 amazing panelists here today. And before we get to meet them, I just want to go through some housekeeping items. So we are recording this program and we'll make it available later on the Career Success YouTube channel, as well as share it with registered students and alumni. And we will be asking you all to complete a survey towards the end of the program, which I will include in the chat box. So please take the time to fill that out. And then at the end of the program, we'll also open it up to Q&A. So please feel free to enter questions that you have in the chat box at any time, and we'll make time for those at the end. So I'd like to introduce each panelist and excuse my eye contact as I read from the script. So first and foremost, we have Kelsey Trudeau, who grew up in Vermont as a first-gen college student. She graduated with a BA in English and completed 2 years of service in Washington, D.C. before teaching for 2 more years after that. Kelsey proudly served as a recruiter with City Year and loves getting to work with students who are thinking about making an impact after graduation through service and community work. Hi, Kelsey. Okay, next we have Jesse Poquette. Originally from Portland, he studied history at the University of Oregon before moving to New York City to teach 3rd grade for 5 incredible years. Currently, he works as a recruitment manager for Teach for America, helping to manage Teach for America's relationship with several universities across California. Welcome, Jesse. Next, we have Alex Barrera. He's a Peace Corps recruiter for UCSC, an entrepreneur and a father. He served in the Peace Corps as a project consultant for the municipality of the Canego, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, in the Dominican Republic. You can find him on Instagram and he'll drop his name in the chat, where he's promoting a new cultural immersion and language acquisition course held in the Dominican Republic based on the practices the Peace Corps utilizes in the field. Welcome, Alex. And last but not least, we have Quinn Walker, Community Relations Specialist at Americorps. He is an Americorps alumni and a Peace Corps alumni, having served in the Republic of Moldova. His duties with Americorps include recruitment, engaging elected officials, and public policy, and building public and private partnerships, Welcome, Quinn. Awesome. So we are going to jump into some pre-written questions and then open it up to audience Q&A. And like I said before, please submit your questions in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to start with Kelsey. So what has your personal journey experience been?
Hey, thanks, Taylor. And thank you all for joining. Super excited to be here. As Taylor mentioned, I grew up in Vermont in a super rural community, about 5 minutes from the Canadian border. And I'm an only child too. So like navigating that whole high school to college experience was definitely a treat. And I had always been interested in education, but especially that transition and, seeing how I was not as prepared as some of my peers in college, and my school was more underfunded. I really started to get interested in educational equity. We didn't have ed as a major, so ended up getting my bachelor's in English. And then I was like, what am I going to do with this? So I ended up doing 2 years of service, actually with Teach for America. I was placed in a middle school classroom, and I worked right outside DC in Prince George's County, Maryland, and loved it so much. Ended up teaching for 2 years after that as well. And my last school placement was actually at a school that City Year was in. So that was my first glimpse into City Year. A lot of my friends had served as City Year Corps members. I finally get their jokes and things now that I understand City Year lingo. And yeah, ended up moving to California and kind of used my alumni network from Americorps and TFA to find some really cool job opportunities. I really realized that for-profit education was something that I was not interested in. I really appreciate the nonprofit world. And yeah, ended up participating as a coach in a teacher coaching study with the Department of Education, and worked with teachers in California, Chicago, and Georgia, which was really cool. And then found this current position as a recruiter with City Year, and I've been here for a little over a year now. And just, yeah, really love getting to talk to folks who are thinking about next steps and also wanting to work against those systemic inequities in our communities. I also got to use my Siegel Education Award I'm actually about to graduate with my master's in education, but specifically critical literacy and social justice. So that's been a really cool lens for this work as well. So yeah, excited to be here and yeah, share more.
Awesome. Super excited to have you. I am going to throw that question at Alex. What has your personal journey and experience been?
That's a great question. So how do I say this? So I grew up in, for American standards, extreme poverty. I come from an indigenous background, and I was born in South Texas. And even now, like right now, I'm actually currently in Texas. I'm living with my grandparents to help take care of them during this pandemic. And even now, like every time I go out and see my community, I see, the same conditions that I would see in the Dominican Republic as a Peace Corps volunteer, and so that brings me to my point really, and is the point of growth. And that is, one thing, that I really cherished about my Peace Corps experience when I was a volunteer was the fact that it allowed me for the first time a bit of freedom to really think and self-reflect on who I was as a person. And, I was very fortunate, right, in my life to be able to travel to many different countries around the world. And one thing I realized when I was in my service was that I was traveling in a way because I was running away from who I was, right? And so I really take pride in my service because it allowed me to self-reflect on that and to dive deep into my self-conscious and to really understand a lot of the traumatic issues that I've had to endure as a child and as a adolescence, and to really understand how not only am I not a product of that, but I have vastly improved. And because of that, my main real mission is to really support the Peace Corps, what they're doing, to share those opportunities to people, especially the communities that don't necessarily understand or know about the Peace Corps too much because of our historic issues with, race and ethnicity here. And so, and I support that because to me, I see it as an opportunity to grow the way I did. And yeah, I went a little deep there, but that's my little journey right now.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Alex. Okay, Quinn, do you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. And it's so nice to be around so many people who have served in so many different programs. I grew up in Northern California. When I was about to graduate from high school, I felt like, you get presented with these three options. You can go straight into the workforce, right? You can go directly to college, or you can go into the military, but not enough individuals, I think, know about some of these gap years or alternatives. And for me, when I was at a high school, I was also a first generation college student. I didn't have a lot of support at home as far as like, hey, you need to take your SATs before you apply to schools. I didn't have any of that figured out. And I also wasn't really ready. I didn't have the finances, but I also wasn't sure what I wanted to study. I didn't necessarily want to go and spend all this money to get a 4-year degree when I didn't exactly know how that was going to help me. And so I took advantage of an Americorps program called City Year. And I traveled from my small Northern California town, never had really left the state before, hopped into my car and drove across the country to New Hampshire and spent the next 10 months serving in a school in New Hampshire doing in-class support and mentoring and after-school work. And I just loved that. I got to meet so many diverse young people from all across the country. And then I had this opportunity to gain all these experiences and skills and leadership skills, and also financial aid, because the university that I ended up applying to in New Hampshire matched my education award. And so I ended up having over $10,000 to help pay for my undergrad experience. And And having done city year, going through college, I was just so much more prepared. I got so much more out of the college experience because I had done a gap year and a service year. And by the time I was about to graduate from undergrad, I was almost in a similar situation as I was at a high school. You know, I wasn't exactly sure if I was ready to jump right into a 9 to 5 to try to pay back my loans, because that grace period was coming to an end. And I said, hey, I got 6 months and I need to start paying back these loans. And I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to grow more as a person. So that led me to the tiny but mighty Republic of Moldova as a Peace Corps volunteer. Had an amazing 2.5 years serving in Eastern Europe. Just loved that experience. Upon completing that term of service, I went and worked for the Peace Corps for several years as a recruiter before making my way over to Americorps and CCC, which is a super unique Americorps program, and one that I really wish I would have known about ahead of time, because it's something I would have definitely taken advantage of, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
I'm excited to hear about it. Thanks, Quinn. Jesse, can you take it away?
Yes, indeed. Thank you again, Taylor. Thank everyone else for being here and listening to all of us. Yeah, so I guess my journey kind of a little different. I mean, I from Portland, Oregon. I went to University of Oregon. The only thing that I knew I wanted to do when after I graduated was get the heck out of Oregon and get as far away as I could. That was kind of like my biggest priority. But other than that, I really didn't know. So I had moved to New York City and just kind of took the first job that presented itself to me, which was actually working in advertising for a couple of years, just kind of a weird way, roundabout way of getting into education. But I worked in advertising in New York City for a couple of years and just found that experience to be very unfulfilling and unrewarding. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more engaging, a little bit more meaningful. And I just started to get more invested kind of in social justice and equity work in general. And so education and Teach for America was something that kind of presented itself to me. And I actually transitioned as a professional to becoming a teacher. So I stayed in New York City. I ended up teaching 3rd grade for 5 years. I initially wanted to teach high school. I was like, I'm going to be a history teacher and I'm going to like wear a tweed jacket and like have really like interesting conversations about like the Industrial Revolution or something. But was placed in 3rd grade, but ended up like loving that experience so much I committed to doing 2 years for it, but ended up staying for 5, all of 3rd grade. And it really just taught me the incredible transcendent power of education and just how important that experience was. It was just an important experience for me, both personally and professionally. And now in my work with Teach for America as a recruiter, I really enjoy getting to hopefully like impart that experiences to other individuals looking to get involved in education, potentially thinking about getting into education, try to convince people to go that route, do it. It is incredibly meaningful and rewarding, and also with all of like the importance and heaviness that a lot of these conversations center around, sometimes we forget it's also incredibly fun and creative and a great way to like earn a living. So I'll end it there.
Love that. Thank you. All right. So we're going to jump into the next question. And it is, what would a day in a life look like in your program or organization? And Quinn, you can start us off.
Oh man, that's a really tough question because I would probably ask some of my core members who serve in Americorps and CCC, and then they would probably give that generic, like there's no, oops, I got muted there for a second. Yeah, so it probably makes more sense to just briefly describe the program. NCCC, the residential team-based program, and so over the course of 10 months, a group of young people on teams of 8 to 12 pile into 15-passenger government vans and essentially travel around the country on these epic road trips, doing different service projects with different nonprofit organizations over the course of their service year. So they may be 3 months up and it's 3 different project rounds. So you serve one location for 3 months, one location for 3 months, and one location for another 3 months. And so a core member could start their 3 months of experience up in Montana building houses for Habitat for Humanity, and learning about construction and helping solve affordable housing problem that's so important in this country. And then after 3 months working in Montana building houses, they hop in their van and travel all the way to Southern California, where they're now working in Joshua Tree National Park on environmental restoration projects, trail building, etc. And then the next 3 months, they may be deployed to Oakland, California to work at a COVID-19 vaccination site, helping to vaccinate the most vulnerable populations in downtown Oakland. I mean, that's just an example of one team from our service year, right? And so a day in the life is, it's team-based. So you live and work with other young people. So you would start the day off with a team meal, and then you would go to one of your locations, be it you're building houses with Habitat, or you're doing trail building with Joshua Tree National Park, or you're working at an after-school program in Hawaii, or you're doing COVID-19 vaccination work in Oakland, and you would work there pretty much all day, and then most likely you would come home, have a team meeting, debrief the day, share a family-style meal all together as a team, and then do that again for the next 3 months before you deploy to another part of the country. And some of our members, they start out in one of 4 regional campuses, but oftentimes they'll start in Sacramento, which is where I'm based out of, and they'll drive to West Virginia to work for 3 months, and then they drive to Kentucky, and then they drive to Montana. I mean, it's just this incredible adventure, and you get exposed to so many different nonprofit and government organizations. It's a real unique program.
Dang, I wish I could do that right now. Alex, what is a day in the life look at it like at Peace Corps?
I'm glad you called me, because I was gonna say, Quinn, that sounds amazing. But for the Peace Corps, I'll keep it short, and I'll just describe the way it was for me. So because there's so much nuance, and for everyone, like for Quinn, it would have been totally different. I was in a tropical island. It was really hot. But one thing I would say is this, you would be surprised, like no matter how different your surrounding is to what you were used to, how resilient we are as human beings, and how we create routines no matter where we go. And so I would say your average day is very routine. For me, I would wake up, I would hear the chickens crow, the cows mooing, make my coffee. Then I would go for a run in the morning time. And depending on what stage of my project I was in, either I was going to the middle school to teach environmental education, or I was going to the local government place to help them with my federal grants that I was drafting, or even going to like local community centers like churches, or what we call Centro de Madres, which is like a mother's center or group. And then I would be teaching or talking about the project and what we're doing, and how we as a community can use our own activism to clean the environment, because my project had to deal with solid waste and management and stuff like that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Kelsey.
Yeah, every time I listen to everyone else talk about their programs, I'm like, I want to sign up for Peace Corps. Like, I want to sign up for everything. So a day in the life with City Year, excuse me, in NCCC, it is team-based also. So you are serving at a school site with 8 to 15 other Corps members who are doing exactly the same thing you're doing every day, just in different classrooms. So you start the day, you're going to get there before students arrive and have like a team builder activity, get excited for the day, and check in with each other. And then you will start greeting students as they get to campus, and get them hyped for the day, get them excited. And then during the school day itself, you are working with a partner teacher. We do work 3rd through 10th grade. So if you're in an elementary school, you usually have one partner teacher, one group of students that you are with the entire year. You'll get to know all of them super, super well. And then if you're in a middle or a high school, typically you'll have one group of students and travel with them to 2 or 3 of their core classes. So definitely math and literacy. and then maybe a science or a social studies class as well. And so for 2 or 3 of those periods a day, you're going to be like that extra support in the room with your partner teacher, answering quick questions, making sure students are engaged, and just, again, being that additional resource. And then after that, you will do small group or one-on-one pull-out. We have what's called a focus list. And so those 10 to 12 students on your focus list, you're going to get to know even better. You'll spend a lot of time with them. And some of those students you'll be working with for academic tutoring. So you might do a pull out and, reteach or reinforce a lesson the teacher just taught. Other students, you're going to be doing more mentoring and social emotional learning, especially right now. Quite frankly, I could use social emotional learning again. So like talking about your feelings, how to positively communicate with those around you. And again, building those relationships with those students as well. And yeah, you'll do that throughout the day. You'll have time to like meet and plan with your partner teacher, make sure you're on the same page, talk about your lessons. You'll have time to meet and plan with other core members who are planning similar lessons. And then after the school day itself is over, we transition into after school programs. So that's about 2 hours, 1 hour being an enrichment lesson. So a lot of times like art or yoga or health, a lot of times, incorporating those things that often get cut the fastest are, art and music and those kinds of things. San Jose has a STEAM curriculum they use that Google helped us create. So definitely a lot of resources for that. And then the second hour is more like informal homework help. And that's usually you and one other core member and like 20 to 25 students. And then after students leave, you'll have another quick like team huddle with your fellow core members at school, and then head out for the day. And we also usually have every other Friday as a professional development day. So those days you might still be at your school, but not with students, or you might go to a partner site and do more like resume building workshops, networking opportunities, and just getting those soft skills and getting yourself ready for your next steps after service as well.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. Jesse, what is a day in a life like for a Teach for America?
Yeah, so kind of similar to what Alexander was sharing, that the experience is really nuanced, depending on like where you're placed and a lot of other external factors. It is kind of difficult to nail down like one specific day in life experience. At Teach for America, we place teachers in over 50 different regions across the country, and teaching as full-time teachers in K through 12, all ages and all subjects. So, depending on where you're at, your day is going to look very different, whether you are teaching elementary school in Los Angeles or teaching, high school science in Philadelphia. But I would say, like in general, your day will consist of waking up very early, probably when it is pitch black outside, going to the school when it is still pitch black, and sitting down in your classroom, planning out the day, getting ready. And students come and run throughout the day, and all of a sudden then you get to like take a deep breath at the end after the day is over, and kind of like reflect on everything and plan and get ready for the next day. That's kind of like the most succinct version of the day with Teach for America that I can think
of. Awesome, yeah. And you get to meet with all the great students, which is fun. Yes, respect to all the teachers, Alex. So our next question is kind of a two-part. So what are the benefits of serving with your organization? And then also on the opposite side, what's the biggest challenge? So I will start with Kelsey on this one.
Wasn't expecting that. You're tricky, Taylor. Yeah. So there's a lot of different benefits for sure to serving with City Year. It is a paid position, so you do receive a living stipend that is based on the cost of living for the city that you're serving in. So we have 29 sites across the country. And the stipend is definitely doable for one. I tell people to take into account any financial obligations you do have, but you can put any student loans you have into loan forbearance, like Quinn mentioned before too. I also took advantage of that. Super helpful. Don't have to worry about it. And when you take your loans out at the end of service too, Americorps pays the interest that you accrue for all Americorps programs. So that's also very helpful. And we also, if you're moving more than 50 miles, you qualify for a relocation benefit of $500 in your first or second stipend payment to kind of help offset that cost of the move. And you do qualify to, it's optional, but you can enroll in food benefits as well. So like CalFresh in California, a lot of our core members take advantage of. And that's usually an extra $190 that they can use for food items at any place that has food, even like Walmart and Target, which can kind of help you stretch out your stipend as well. You can opt in to receive your health insurance through City Year. And we have a bunch of employee assistance programs, including access to counseling services. When we're in person, some sites have counselors who actually come to meet with you in person. Right now, we're using Zoom and online services, and you also get 12 days of time off throughout your service. So if you need a day to yourself or have a grad school interview or a dentist appointment or something, you have those days. And then you also get the Siegel Education Award, which is $6,395 next year, that you can use or save for up to 7 years. I didn't know what program I wanted to do, so it was nice to have that time. And City Year also has partnership scholarships with over 110 different schools and programs, anything from education to law school, med school, nursing, social work, psychology. So those scholarships are 25 to 100% of the tuition, depending on the programs. Also very helpful because school is expensive. And then, like I mentioned too, we have a great alumni network. 50% of our City Year staff are City Year alums, and the rest of us are Americorps alums too. And you get a lot of professional development opportunities, like I mentioned too, and just kind of, we call it life after City Year, LACY. So really just preparing you for those next steps, making sure you're building up your resume. I'm sure Quinn could talk to you about it even more. But yeah, just a lot of benefits in terms of like professional, but also monetary too. And then in terms of a challenge, I think the biggest one is the long day, and working with students can often be emotional. And so, you're getting to school, like Jesse mentioned too, before students, it might still be dark in the morning, and it might be starting to get dark when you leave. They are 10-hour days. You're going to be, putting a lot of yourself into your work with your students, and you're going to build connections, and it's going to be draining work some days and also incredibly rewarding, but just, taking that time for yourself and self-care and, doing what you need to do. I know I would get home, and I lived with 3 other core members, and we would all just like lay in our beds and yell to each other because we were so exhausted. We didn't want to get up, but we were like, who's ordering takeout tonight? Because I'm not moving. So yeah, definitely that long day can be a challenge, and just kind of figuring out what you need to do for yourself to make that balance work.
Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, but the reward seems like the best part. So, okay, Quinn, do you want to go?
Sure, all the things Kelsey said. That was, no, there's a lot of overlap there between Americorps and Triple C and City Year as far as those like tangible benefits. I mean, I'll just kind of highlight a few of them again. But you get an education award. Right now, it's $6,495, so about $6,500. But it seems to go up every single year, and a lot of universities and graduate programs will match that education award, and so that's a decent chunk of change, especially if a university partnership is involved. And also just like the ability to get merit-based scholarships. This isn't something that's a guarantee, right? But I'm in graduate school now, and I did City Year and I did Peace Corps, and I was able to get graduate school pretty much funded. And there's no way I would have been able to get so much financial aid and scholarships if it was not for taking advantage of these type of service experiences. Within Triple C, again, there's no cost associated with it, right? So your food, your living expenses, there's nothing you really have to worry about financially, which really makes it accessible to anyone in this country, right? It doesn't matter if you come from a background where you have some kind of wealth. I mean, anybody can do Americorps and Triple C, and we'll take care of you for the duration of your service year. There's a lot of things that make it really unique, I would say, as far as benefits. I mean, one thing I'll just mention would be like, if you're in an interview with an employer and they ask you about a time where you had to overcome a challenge, or tell me about a stressful day at work, how did you deal with that? I think City Year does this, NCCC, Teach for America probably gives you a ton of these stories too. But in the NCCC context, when you say, well, let me tell you about the time that I went to Paradise, California after the campfire and met with survivors and was an integral part of that community rebuilding. Let me tell you about the time when I was in downtown Oakland in the middle of a global pandemic, vaccinating that community. Let me tell you about this road trip to West Virginia to go rebuild houses after devastating floods. You know what I mean? There's just these unique stories that are going to really set you apart and give you some of this lived experience that not a lot of other individuals have an opportunity to get. And so, and on top of that, being on a team with diverse young people from all across the country and what you learn from each other during that experience is really a major benefit. The difficulty of NCCC, I mean, it's team-based, and yeah, maybe these long road trips sound really awesome, but they could probably be pretty trying as well. I always think of a road trip as like really great after I reflect on it a few months, but sometimes when you're in a team with 10 other people and somebody's playing the music that you can't stand, and it can be kind of trying, right? And it's hard to work on a team with interpersonal dynamics over the course of 10 months, and you're around these individuals a lot in NCCC. So that can be really difficult. And also, yeah, I mean, you're a lot of times at NCCC, you go and work in disaster areas, and you do liaison with community members who've experienced a lot of tragedy. And that can also be very difficult to witness and be a part of that experience. And so I'll go ahead and stop there.
Thank you, Quinn. All right, Jesse, I'll let you go. Biggest are the benefits and a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, with benefits of Teach for America, if you are placed at Teach for America, you are a full-time teacher with salary and benefits that go along with it. So you'd be paid the same salary that any other first-year teacher in that specific district would be getting paid. And that obviously changes depending on where you are placed. In addition, there are some regions that do offer completely free master's degrees in education that you can pursue while you are completing your 2-year commitment with Teach for America. So like when I was in New York, I actually received a free master's degree when I came out of those 2 years, which was huge for me. And like just financially, it was not going to be possible for me to teach if I would have had to like go back to school, get a master's, take on more debt and all this other stuff. So Teach for America gave me the ability to do that and get that free master's. I hesitate to talk too much about that in New York City because that program actually no longer exists. But in the Bay Area, a region, you can get a free master's still from National University. And that kind of, the specific school partnerships that we have kind of vary from region to region. Kind of what Quinn and Kelsey were both talking about, there are a lot of other like grad school partnerships that Teach for America has, specific like kind of like incentives and programs that are only available to Teach for America alumni. I think one of the biggest benefits of Teach for America is the amount of just like training that you will get to become an educator, as well as the really vast alumni network that you'll have access to as soon as you come in. So we have over 60,000 alumni, and they're in a variety of different fields, regardless of what your specific interests are. Like there is a network within Teach for America that like aligns those interests, and like part of our organization is really to help you grow professionally after your time in the Corps as well. So like just anecdotally, like the reason why I'm in this position now as a recruiter is like A, I believe in the mission, but B, it's because I made some professional connections during my time in the classroom as well that enabled me to actually have this role, which is really great. It enabled me to work remotely and move to Oregon to be closer to my family. So all of that stuff, I think is really large benefits. In terms of like challenges, yeah, kind of like same thing that Kelsey and Quinn both talked about, like long day. It is very demanding. I think, especially with Teach for America, because you are given the responsibility of being a full-time teacher on day one, that can be very intimidating. That can be very overwhelming. There is a lot that is demanded of you from the get-go when you oftentimes don't have experience in the classroom. And it's like, okay, you'll go through summer training, but there is really no substitute for like being in the classroom and being in charge of your own class. So that can be really overwhelming, and that can be obviously very challenging. Teach for America does have a lot of support systems in there to help make that experience less challenging and more doable, but it does come with a lot of responsibility. And the flip side of that responsibility, I always say, is that with this great responsibility does come a lot of personal and professional growth over the course of your first year, especially, but definitely over year 2.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse. Okay, Alex, do you want to talk about benefits and challenges for the Peace Corps?
Sure. So for the Peace Corps, of course, even though we call our service members volunteers, it's a big misnomer. So you do get paid for it. We provide you with a living stipend and a housing stipend that act as your paycheck. And I think the reason why we call our service members volunteers is for 2 reasons. The first reason is that the idea of the Peace Corps is to work within the local capacity where you are serving, And then the second reason is the obvious consequence of that, which is you will get paid less than a federal minimum wage. Hence, we can't call you a federal employee, right? But even though that sounds kind of, dramatic and weird and even illegal, right? It's not. And the thing is, like, for example, in the Dominican Republic, I got paid about $300 a month, which of course in California is not even possible, right? But in Dajabon, where I was living, was actually a pretty comfortable wage. I wasn't rich or anything, but I didn't have to necessarily budget too hard to just get by and to pay my bills, right? So another example is like my largest expense was my rent, which was about $30 a month. So just to give you a sense of the cost of living in the area. But just to give you a full range of the benefits, right? So it includes, of course, housing and so forth. So basically, we're paying you to be able to travel to a different country. We provide you with language training. You go through 3 months of intense training where you learn from local professionals about that language. Let's say you don't speak any bit of that language that you are serving in, that you are going to be able to speak. I would say more or less, if you don't know anything about that language, by the end of those 3 months, you will be intermediate low or intermediate mid, where you'll be conversational, basic conversational, and be able to survive and get by, right? And then over the course of your 2 years, you develop almost full fluency, if not fluency, like a local. And so for those who want to learn a new language, this is really the perfect way to do so. You also get $10,000 of what we call transitional funds after you complete service. And so that's an amazing benefit because that allows you, after you complete service, to be able to make your next step at your own leisure. You don't have to necessarily get back into the hustle real quick. You can take your time, look for the job that you really want to do, or go apply for that grad school you want to go to and do so. On top of that, we put you into the Covered Up Fellowship Program, which grants you tuition access to over 100 different programs across the country. That includes, for example, like Middlebury, Berkeley, Columbia University, Harvard, so forth. There's so many of them. The one that I look to the most is UH Manoa in Honolulu. So if you ever want to live in Hawaii, boom, there you go. What else? Of course, you get free healthcare. Unfortunate to have to say, but that's a benefit that you get. You can defer your student loan, so you don't have to worry about paying them during your time in service, and that includes up to 6 months afterwards as a grace period. Let's see. And there's so many, but at the top of my head, that's what I can think of at the moment. But as far as the challenges go, and there are many, right? There are many challenges. This is perhaps one of the most challenging experiences you can have as an American. And I don't mean that lightly, but I also believe that these challenges help you to fortify yourself both personally and professionally in many different ways, just like what I kind of alluded to earlier in the beginning of this conversation. One specific challenge that I can really talk about is really just the fact of cultural integration, right? The fact that, for example, right? Before I did Peace Corps, I traveled to 5 continents, many different countries, backpacked across Europe, the Levant and North Africa. I studied abroad in South America. I lived off and on in Mexico and so forth. And there's nothing that compares to the experience I had in the Peace Corps as far as traveling goes and cultural integration, because you are in there. You are in perhaps you could be in a large city, a town, or even a village like I was, right? You could be somewhere in Eastern Europe, the Caribbean, you could be somewhere in the Pacific Islands, Madagascar. And so the challenge that you face really is the fact that you can't even tell a joke, for example. Let's say you're speaking in a language you just learned, you're just conversational in, and you want to tell a joke to somebody and you can't. Like that small, very basic, fundamental aspect of what humanity is. That's the challenge, right? It creates a sense of isolation in your mind, right? Even if you're surrounded by people. And what I say is this: as you progress through your language acquisition, and as you start to develop more authentic relationships in your community, that sense of isolation really dissipates over time, right? Until eventually that community that was strange to you at first becomes your new home, right? And so that's really the big challenge, I would say.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Mhm.
All right, so we're going to jump into the next question. I'm going to shorten this one a little bit. So what was the most impactful part of your service for you? And I'm going to start with Jesse.
I had a feeling I was going to go first. So yeah, also great question. For me, the most impactful thing was just, this is kind of like similar to what Alexander was just sharing about like creating that community and like really feeling like you're a part of that community. Like teaching, like being a part of that community and also being responsible for like cultivating that community was incredibly impactful for me. Like I was saying before, that like I initially got into education thinking that I was just like really passionate about the subject content and like information that I was teaching. And what I realized after my first couple of years in the classroom is that what was actually giving me motivation was being responsible for creating a community. And I think especially as an elementary school teacher, that's something that you really need to do well. So, forming relationships with my students, forming relationships with the parents, and like really being brought in and like given again that like responsibility of kind of like being a really strong imperative member of the community that I was living in was just so humbling and motivating for me. At the end of every single day of teaching my school, the way that we would dismiss the students is they would line up behind you on the playground, and then the parents would line up in front of me, and I would shake every single parent's hand and kind of give them a quick little update on like what happened during the day and what like they needed to work on. And I don't know if they're still doing that now, if they'll still do that next year now, but that was my favorite part of the day. Not that I didn't love being a member of working with my students, but just like that, knowing that I had been given the responsibility of like being in charge of the well-being of this person's child, who's like the most important thing in the world to them. That is like a huge responsibility, and just like knowing that you were part of that community there, building that community was incredibly impactful throughout my time in the classroom.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Quinn, what was the most impactful part of the service for you?
Yeah, I'll kind of keep this brief. I'll touch a little bit about Peace Corps, maybe CERS. And I actually didn't serve in Americorps and CCC specifically. It's just a program that I love to talk about. But I would say that the members who serve in NCCC would talk a lot about just the impact, and this is kind of an overused term right now, I think, but like in unprecedented situations or times. I mean, NCCC really goes in response to disasters and big events in history. I mean, they go to Hurricane Harvey. They were all, I mean, there's tons of Americorps and CCC teams after Hurricane Katrina, Campfire in Paradise right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. So just like this direct impact on like the nation's biggest problems. We work a lot in food banks. We do a ton of building of affordable housing. So if there's an interest that you really care about that's really impacting U.S. society, I feel like NCCC teams are always working to kind of meet the biggest needs. It's kind of high impact, and so yeah, I mean, so that, and then the travel, to be able to do the epic road trips and see different parts of the country when maybe you didn't have the opportunity to really have that travel experience. That would probably be another one that they would talk about. And then the most common thread would be the relationships they build with other Corps members. And then I'll just share one from Peace Corps because I'll just share one from Peace Corps. And I would say that the access to stories that, from my experience, that you never get access to stories like this unless you were a Peace Corps volunteer. It's a lot about what Alex was talking about. Just, for example, I lived in a small little village in Moldova, lived with a host family. My host father, grew up during the Soviet Union, fought in Afghanistan with the Red Army, was his first job was on a collectivist Soviet farm, and like hearing his perspective on like growing up in that environment and serving in the Soviet Army overseas, and like all of those stories that, first of all, you have to have trust, you have to have language competency, none of those things are gained unless you're there for 2 years, you know what I mean? And so just the access to human stories that if you were a diplomat or you worked at the embassy or you did anything else in international development, you're never going to get access to the stories that you get in Peace Corps. So I'll say that.
Thank you. Okay, well, Alex, you got to tell us then about Peace Corps.
Okay.
Follow it up.
Dang, how could I lead up to that? that was an intense story, and that's true. I mean, it's quite fascinating, like to be in those situations. See, dang, now I'm stumped.
It's going to be hard to top the Red Army.
I mean, right? Yeah. Did they ever think you were a spy?
Definitely, they did.
Wow. Well, I think I kind of already alluded to, for me, what were like some of the more impactful things was my personal development. So, I mean, there's so many stories, and that's really the issue right now, is me trying to find one of those stories. But I could actually give you one right here. So my wife, who just walked in, you probably saw her in the background earlier. She came to visit me actually on my last month in service, right? And she actually came to my site. And the one thing that I still remember is when she started to cry, because she saw how everyone in the community, they would wave at me, they would know who I was, call my name out. And she just saw this sort of circle of love or trust that you don't really see too often, right? And just to be reminded of how powerful community can be, and how no matter how normal I am, or I'm not Superman or Superwoman or anything like that, like, and Peace Corps, we're not necessarily trying to do that. We're not trying to change the world or save the world or anything. We're just sharing bonds between Americans and other people wherever you are serving. And so when you are able to develop that sense of community like that, and to have other people see it and then cry and see the emotional impact that to me was really powerful.
Thank you, Alex. All right, Kelsey, what was the most impactful part of service for you?
Cool. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to echo a lot of what other people have said. I think for me, it's kind of like two parts. One, definitely like relationships and community. Also, I, went to the same grocery stores that my students and parents went to, and would get to embarrass them when they saw me in like the cereal aisle. And, just watching my students grow, I think especially my second year, because my first year is still just kind of a blur. Like watching my homeroom, who, they came in feeling like they had this label of like, we're not an honors class, we're not any, like, they just had all these preconceived notions. And then at the end of the year, having them just like 100% of them like working and excited, and seeing that excitement on their faces. And, then, hearing their teachers the next year being like, they keep doing this thing you taught them. And, they just graduated from high school last year, and a bunch of them reached out to me, and I really wanted to go to their graduation, but for obvious reasons couldn't. But they, like, one called me and we talked for like 3 hours about what he was doing and what his classmates were doing. And a couple emailed me and were like, I still use that thing you taught me about how to write an essay. And it's just so cool to know that, they are still thinking about those things and still have like smiles on their faces from class too, which I definitely do. And then the other part for me is just like hearing their stories, like hearing my students' stories, my family's stories, and like taking that, I definitely, especially with TFA, did a lot of identity work and have kind of like taken that, there were a lot of similarities in our identities, coming from a low socioeconomic background, but also a lot of differences too. And so getting to like take that into the work that I'm doing with City Year, but also I'm doing like research on anti-racist pedagogy in my master's classes. And so having all of their stories and feeling that they trusted me to share those things and just getting to like really broaden my experience was, super impactful. And my service was probably still my favorite experience work-wise.
Awesome. Okay, so we are on our last question and we have about 8 minutes left of the program. So I want to, if you all can kind of get through this, and then maybe we can open it up to 1 or 2 more questions. So what can these people do now, these students in the audience, and what are the good next steps for your program? So we can start with Quinn. And also feel free to drop stuff in the chat if that's helpful as well.
Yeah, so I will definitely put a link to our website. I mean, we're accepting applications right now to start serving either as a team leader in September or a core member in October with NCCC, either out of the Sacramento campus, Denver campus. We also have 2 campuses, one in Iowa, one in Mississippi. It's a really unique time to serve right now because we are doing a lot of COVID response, but also long-term disaster recovery all around the country. And the makeup is really about 50% of the members already have a full year college degree. Some even have master's degrees. And then some of the members, about 50%, have some college, or even a percentage have just a high school degree. And so anywhere from 18 to 26 years old, you can serve at NCCC. And yeah, I mean, I know, I wish I could do it right now too. Just like the ability to get exposure to a lot of different types of work with different nonprofits and different sectors. I think that's a really unique thing about NCCC. So I'll put the website on there. I'll put my email in there. And if you have some questions about serving in the program, feel free to reach out anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, Quinn. All right, Kelsey.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be super quick. I dropped my email in the chat. Definitely feel free to reach out with any questions, City Year related, anything related. Definitely love talking to other folks, as I only really talk to like my dog and my husband right now. So please, any human contact. And then I also put in my interest form if you do want to talk more formally about City Year 2 and our website. We do have an application deadline coming up at the end of the month, May 28th. So that would be starting in like July of this year, and for your 11-month service commitment. So yeah, definitely reach out with any questions and start an application for sure.
Awesome. Jesse, do you want to go?
Yes, and I will be brief as well. So unfortunately, Teach for America, our last deadline to join the Corps in this upcoming fall has already passed, but we are opening up applications again next fall in September, as well as applications to apply early that will start next spring. So if you are a first or second year, you can look into those as well. So I put my email in there. If you'd like to learn more about Teach for America, please don't hesitate to reach out. I also put a link to our application. You can check out application, and it's kind of like the general interest form. You put your information there, and someone will reach out with you to like talk more about it. But yeah, like Kelsey said, like human contact, bring it on. I'm here for any questions.
Awesome, thank you. And Alex.
Okay, so after last March, we actually stopped our programs globally because we didn't know how bad the pandemic was going to end up. But I am glad to say that we are starting to revamp that, and we are expecting to send our first volunteers out in January of next year. So with that in mind, the timeline to apply is now if you are graduating anytime this year, because the application takes up to 8 to 12 months to complete. So if you're applying today, you're applying for January of next year. And let's say you graduate next year in May of next year, then I would recommend looking to seriously apply sometime in the fall of this year. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So I also want to just open it up to audience Q&A. If anyone in the audience has a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask or write it in the chat. I haven't received anything in the chat yet, so I will give it a minute. And then I also have some questions from the registration list that I can read out, and not everyone has to answer, but it could be helpful.
I have a question for Alexander and the Peace Corps. How often are the applications open? Because I know that Peace Corps is completely voluntary, but I just wanted to have enough time to pay off some extra loans, extra credit card debt before going on my way. So what are the windows other than January to be able to join?
Definitely. So I would always think about applying 8 months beforehand, at the latest, right? So you can apply as early as you wish. Your application, once you do submit it, will be active for about 1.5 years or so before we ask you to apply again. But yeah, around 8 months, I would say, before your expected departure date. Another thing too, though, is that $10,000 that I mentioned before, you can actually, when you start service, you can ask the Peace Corps to pay off your bills while you're serving using that money. So you don't even have to worry about any debt incurring or any bills you might have to pay. The only thing I would recommend is to think about budgeting for the first 3 months while you are training, because the active payments won't actually start until you become a volunteer. So the first 3 months when you're training, you would have to worry about managing, your finances for that part.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Just want to give the audience a moment. Okay, well, I guess that concludes the program. I could go into more questions, but I think everyone's given a lot of time and effort today. So thank you all for doing that and being here. I am going to submit a quick survey in the chat. So if you take the time to fill that out, that would be awesome. Oh, we just got a question in the chat. It says, what if I'd like to join, but I'm not too sure at the moment? Well, why don't you, I would think the best way to do that is maybe reach out and just talk to one of these great panelists, and you can have a good conversation with them about their programs or whichever program you're interested in. So I'd like to thank everyone. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelsey.
I was just going to say too, I think sometimes people, like, I don't know, I personally always got nervous before, like, oh, they're a recruiter, they must just want me to apply. But like, no, we're definitely just here as resources, like no pressure, definitely reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. All right, so thank you so much, Kelsey, Quinn, Alex, and Jesse. Really appreciate your time. Don't forget to fill out the survey, and then also I'll be sending this recording out for you to view again in case you missed any content today. So I appreciate it, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.